Hello, everybody. I now realize I'm not 100% sure I fixed that correctly, but I guess we'll figure it out. I think I saw that there were some more recent people here. Hi, Quindy. Hi, everyone else who's here. So today I am going to be working on the Mini of the Month, which is a 3D print. Like everybody gets a 3D print, not just the painters getting a master 3D print. So I'm going to try to do what I did with the Halloween figure. I will show these closer up. And do like a tabletop version of the paint job that I did for the web store. Hey Zox2277. I'm sorry I was a scary disembodied voice. Green users, hello. So I think if you've been here before, you know I'm not the fastest painter ever, or even in the ballpark of the fastest people. So my guess is it'll probably take 2 sessions. So and I'm probably being optimistic, but I'm going to work on kind of the things that are more underneath the rest of the equipment and talk about the color scheme a little. And I have realized that I don't know. So I have a giant color wheel. I keep losing track of my reasonably sized color wheel. But I have like a printed one. So let me switch camera view and see if I can get that in the picture. It also has value scale and talks about saturation. But the color scheme that I did on the figure was basically yellow, red, blue triadic color scheme. And that's like very much an old faithful type of color scheme. I like triads. You get 3 colors. Sometimes you need 4. But in this case, I wanted to use 3. And I'll show you the figure in a minute, but it's an example of how you see these colors and you're like, well, how do I make that fit a thief or a peasant or something like that? If shouldn't they not have super bright, expensive clothing or things that would show them in the night and whatnot? Oh, thank you, Clavicus81, for gifting a tier 1 sub to green users and 197 other gift subs. And so this is an example of how you do that. And basically what you do is you use desaturated versions, which are what some of these are in the inner rings. And one of the reasons I picked this color scheme is blue and a pinky red dye were things that were available to medieval European peasants. So they're perfectly realistic colors to use, and I want to try to shift people away from the whole everybody has to be brown and dreary if they're poor and downtrodden, because I don't think that's necessarily true. But in this particular case, I had a lot of, cloth and leather and wood and like a bunch of stuff on her that a lot of it was probably going to be brown. So I kind of had to do something else for her clothing to help things stand out. This figure was an interesting challenge for me. I typically avoid things that are plastered with stuff because I don't like having to deal with this challenge. But Ron suckered me in this time, and it's good to practice stuff that you're not as good or as comfortable with sometimes. So it was an opportunity to do that. So these are the colors I used, and I'm zoomed in too much, on the actual store figure. So this is the skin, the blue clothing, the pinky red clothing, and then this is the stuff we'll talk about next session, but you can see there's some yellow, and yellow brown and reddish brown is kind of where I went with the equipment. So I'm going to do kind of like that, but I want to mix it up a little. One of the things about painting a figure again is it's an opportunity to iterate and see if you can do a better job on stuff that maybe you weren't awesome at the first time. And I think in this case, maybe some parts are a little too desaturated. Oh, that's not the done one. Here she is. So close up it works. From a distance, I'm not sure that, her face, the main area of the character, stands out as much as it should. So I think the blue and pink cloth, some of the pink might be leather, I don't know, are both a little either a little too dull or a little too dark. So I'm going to mess with that a little. And then I'm just going to try something different with the skin for fun. And then next week, I'll show you how I did all of these accessories. Well, some of the accessories at any rate. And made it slightly less of a pain in the butt. And here's the witch character that I was mentioning. So this is a tabletop version of the one I did for the web store for this. Which in this case used different colors. This figure, and there's an article about her on my blog. There's also an article about how you take those colorful things that the color wheel gives you and turn it into something more appropriate for other character types. But in the case of that witch, there had been a couple of specific colors that were promotional along with the figure, and I used those to paint them. Paint the store one, but it was a lot of mixing, so for the tabletop version, one way to save time is less mixing. So also, just for fun, when I went and picked out different blues than I had before, I started with, hello focus, where are you? I started with this one. I thought, well, I'll go a little lighter, and that was called Hobgoblin Blue from the Pathfinder line, but then I noticed there was Hobgoblin Blue from the Bones, or no, Core. Yes, Core, I think. So I was like, all right, let's have 2 Hobgoblin Blues on this person who is not at all Hobgoblin. I guess maybe. I think I just don't know what hobgoblins look like. I think they're one of those things that I've just never really known what they look like. Because I don't think I knew they were blue. It sounds like a thing I wouldn't know. Juan is constantly dismayed and or amazed at me not knowing the traditional colors of things. It's like, I do what I want. I'm a cat. Do what I want. I'm going to up the temperature contrast a little. So instead of using a unifying, I often use similar colors to highlight, like for the top highlights for everything. So yellow mold is a popular one that I like. And Osirian sand in the Pathfinder line, similar thing. It's a light color with a little bit of yellow in it. And you know, assuming that they're out under the sun, it's a nice option. And then I use blue liner a lot to unify my shadows. But in this case, for the blue, I'm going to use a pale cool color as the top highlight. We'll see how that works out. Maybe it won't look coherent. Who knows? Sometimes I like to have a plan in advance. Sometimes I don't. Blue liner obviously works on blue, so I will use it there. I may end up using it on other things because I do have the Learn to Paint kit paints off to one side, so I will raid that as necessary. One thing that I will probably do differently, because a great source of contrast is, you know, so the main ones are like value, whether something's lighter or darker than what's nearby is a great way to make one thing stand out from another. Then hue, just, you know, it's, in this case, is it more bluey, is it more pinky, is it more yellowy for the main colors that I'm working with. But within that, you also have saturation, which is it like a more intense yellow or a less intense yellow kind of thing. But the paints themselves have properties that we can use as contrast. And for miniature painters in particular, we have metallic paints and non-metallic paints, and the sheen difference can really help areas stand out from one another. So I'm mixing up my blues. I'm gonna mix the pinks at the same time, pinky red, whatever we're gonna call it. In this case, I picked Pale Violet Red and Succubus Kiss. And here, since this is the warmer color, I probably will use the yellow mold as my highlight mix. And then I might start using these and realize that I mix things I didn't like at all. But that doesn't usually what happens is I find out I need to add, you know, a step in between or something like that. It's not that I usually end up completely hating the colors that I picked. It's that sometimes it's hard to know whether the amount of steps is appropriate or not. Especially since I like didn't massively plan this out in my head beforehand. Which sometimes I like to try to prep for the show, and then sometimes my sad little cat says, love me, don't do anything useful. And she seems to be having a very tragic day, so. Very tragic. We tried catnip, and we tried going out on the porch. And what else did we try? We tried pointing out that she had had breakfast. I didn't want to give in and give her whipped cream because I don't want to train her to act like a jerk when she wants whipped cream. Don't want to open that door. So this is definitely a richer pink than I used on the original figure. And I think it's a richer blue as well. Which was achievable with some of these dyes that I was talking about. So the blue is in Europe, it was woad until there started being more trade and they got indigo. The chemical substance in woad and indigo is the same. It's just indigo has more of it. So that's why it's more effective and popular as a dye. And then the pinky red is from a plant called madder. So if you've ever heard of, rose madder pink or madder lake, lake just means it's, because rose madder really is a dye. You use it on clothes because it's a dye. But they turn it into paint by laking it, which I guess you let it dry out and then it's sort of a pigment. But what it doesn't gain in this process is any increase in, or not much increase in light fastness, which is a big problem with a lot of dyes. Am I all the way zoomed? I think maybe being one out will help stay in focus, at least for this initial part. I am going a little darker in this initial coat because, there's a lot of inset areas with the clothing. Oh, hold on, I just realized I didn't mix one of my paint mixes. So if you weren't here last week and you have questions about these 3D printed figures, I had this one and another one that I forgot to put over here for today that were, straight out of the blister, as it were. And I tossed them around my desk and showed how I prep them and that kind of thing. I'm actually using different values of colors straight from the beginning. This is certainly something that's useful to do for tabletop miniatures. So that, my base coat is already starting to establish some of my value transitions. What I just did was get a blue liner, which I had not done. And this is the first step I took on the real figure too, was finding places that were heavily inset or should be deeply shadowed and going ahead and doing those, painting those with blue liner before getting too crazy with anything else, to make sure that there wasn't going to be any of this lighter gray primer showing in those places. I think I actually used a darker gray primer on the other one. I think I mixed, for some reason I do not recall now, I mixed a gray primer instead of using the pre-mixed one. I think maybe I was trying to see if it was, this one gets a little shiny. I don't know if you can tell. And I don't know if it's just my bottle or what. But I think I was trying to see if it was going to be a little less shiny if I mixed it myself. And I believe the answer was no, it was not. I'm not sure if I showed the shadow color I'm using is Succubus Kiss. pale violet red. Burgundy wine is the color in the triad that pale violet red is designed to be part of. But I wanted to mix it up a little. I like that Succubus Kiss, and I don't get to use it very often. These colors, alas, will require a second coat. So I'm not being too concerned about the transitions or any of that kind of thing at this point. Well, alright, I'm concerned about the fact that I just put blue liner all over the back of her arm. So a lot of more richly colored colors like these, since I went with a more saturated approach for the pink and the blue, are kind of transparent. So I just accept that's how it is, and they're mostly in the shadows, which is going to end up not being a problem. It's especially not a problem if you start in the mid-tone and then go down. Which is how I often paint. But since I'm doing this base coat anyway, the closer it is to how I want to end up, the easier I'm making my life in the end, I figure, especially from I want to paint this quickly for the table point of view. You get the mixing there because I already have a color in the recess. So that area I'm definitely going to have to come back to, but that's fine. I actually want to check my bottle of paint. Because this particular mix, did I put some water in this? This seems like a little more watery than I expected. Let me mix it together. Okay, maybe I just didn't have it mixed right. Doesn't seem that bad now. Green User says, our cable company's been working on our area this weekend. I hope they don't mess things up. Well, we can hope that you maybe get better cable out of it too, or better internet. I had my nice gray paper out. I just want to switch over to the one that has already had some paint or water on it. So I will have to go back and do the metal later, which could be fun or not. What probably is a good idea right now, and I think I did this on the other one actually, is to just go ahead and use blue liner or black or whatever I would have as a dark color on that now. And then I will just be lightly brushing the metallic over that and hopefully not have to worry about getting too much on this clothing that I've already painted. Oh, yeah, no. I think I did both of those parts pink on the other one, but now they're going to be blue. The undercoat is going to be blue. And I'm going to start the legs a bit darker for a couple of reasons. One is that not as much light is getting over here. Because, especially that leg that's under, practically no light is getting there. Probably just go ahead and put more blue liner there. But also, if I'm trying to draw more attention here, using darker and duller colors down here is a useful way to do that. And she's like matching, but she doesn't have to be matchy-matchy. She's a hireling. She's out on the road. She doesn't get paid that well. Doesn't necessarily have to have matching amazing clothing. But up here, where this is right next to her face, I do want that brighter, I think. But because of how I'm going to paint it, I want to start with the shadow, I believe. Let's see here. Now, it's going to have fairly... it's not, the shadows aren't going to go super dark. These are not deep folds of cloth. They're little cloth wrinkles. That's definitely a little recess area. Make sure I got down here, which I did not. And really, I ought to have done that first. So I've gone around and found all the little nooks and crannies that will be hard to reach later. Like this really, I think I tried to lighten it up a little on the fancy version, but we don't have time for that kind of thing on the non-fancy version. But now I think I will switch to the skin a little while that dries. So I want her skin to have some yellow tones so that it goes with the, you know, blue, yellow, red thing that I'm doing. So I picked out Golden Shadow, Moyangy Brown, which is another Pathfinder color, and Buckskin Pale, and I don't know if that is that much lighter than the other one. So I'll probably go with the Siren Sand. So I want it to be a little lighter and brighter than what I did on the store version. Hey, Valander. So I don't, has everyone been having a good, hope you had a good weekend and got to relax a little. Unless you work on the weekend and you don't work at another time. Because certainly that is true for some people. I was trying to relax a little. Just working on getting better at relaxing. My paint's kind of oozing a little, which I'm actually going to check. It's been long enough since I did my last paint maintenance that I'm finding sometimes when I'm pulling a bottle off the shelf that there is sometimes gooped up stuff there in the tip. I don't think that's happening here because it'll get thicker. So even if the main body of the paint is still in good shape, sometimes you'll have a little clump up there that just gets stuck, and it is annoying and can make you think that your paint is getting too thick when it is not. So I scoop it out and put it back down in the main body of the bottle, and then add just a little bit of water if it's gotten super thick. So my plan for the leather is that some of it will be kind of more reddish and some of it will be kind of more yellowish to go with the rest of the color scheme. And then I can use like blue in the shadows of the metallics to tie in with the red, blue, yellow thing there. Now, when I painted the other one, because this miniature has the classic conundrum of hands or first or later, because there is stuff under the hands, but there's also, you know, stuff with the hand. But do I want to paint the skin tone at the same time? So that is usually the dilemma. And for the fancy version, I decided it would make my life easier to deal with that later, and I don't know if I may decide that here. But I can paint them and then just fix it later too if necessary. I will probably just have the eyes shadowed for now, and because it would be tedious for you to watch me attempt to paint eyes on camera, and it would definitely be tedious for me to attempt doing it. I think with the witch, I thought about this in advance and painted them before the show. But certainly that is a place to save time on a tabletop figure, because if you just do dark shadows in there, really when we look at people from any distance, we are seeing the pattern of light and shadow more than we're seeing details, and it's like the eye socket area will just look pretty shadowed. I don't know if that's actually even dark enough. Let's get a little bit of the blue liner and make even darker shadow. Well, now it's too wet to accept the darker shadow. We shall return to that later. I typically paint the hands a little darker than the face, largely for that I want the attention to be on the face aspect. So I don't want no attention on the hands. My usual approach to a figure is that the face shows us what the person is thinking and the hands show us what they are doing, and that's often important. It isn't important in every figure, but it's often important. In this case, we can see that she's not, the active attacking adventurer type. She's hauling stuff and trudging along. Like, the hands help convey that information. So I don't like to neglect them. I like to paint them up nicely. I just want the face to still be the center of attention. And, I mean, really, the light is closer to here than it is to there, so it makes sense from that point of view as well. Yeah, the face is drying quickly enough. I think I will stick with the face for a little while. Well, possibly I should give a second go to that, but we'll see. Let me see if there's anything that looks super patchy. On my other colors. Since they are somewhat transparent. Well, see, that seems like a problem right there, because that is where I had spilled blue liner, so I just have to lighten that whole section. That's right, this coat was where I hadn't had the paint mixed right, so there's too much water in it, and it is kind of patchy. You can also see a spot now where my blue liner didn't go. I always have that fun with like chainmail and similar textures, is like you think you got everywhere, and then it dries and you realize that you had not, in fact, gotten everywhere. And the legs have a little bit of the lighter color showing through in a few spots. So I will add another coat there as well. And I had painted the under coat a lighter blue. Well, I really regret my choice not to paint it pink, so I think it's going to become purple when I mix the pink and the blue together. In fact, I will just go even with my pink that has a lot more white in it. So for these areas like this chainmail, where I'm going to miss parts, I do like to turn it around and try to catch the whiter, lighter parts. Even if you've primed black, it's good to check spots like that because maybe the primer didn't get all the way in there and you need to just slap a little bit of extra black paint on there. Oh, no, I'll stay zoomed in. I'm going to work on the face a little bit. I go down a brush size. The face is the important part. So if you are like speed painting mini and you want to save time, the face is not the place to save time. Like, you know, cheat on the boots or something because people don't care as much. But don't skimp on the face. I did all right in a speed painting contest once because even though I kind of forgot, you know, to be speedy about halfway through, but I'd done a nice job on the face and I'd done a little bit of kind of underpainting to establish my value. So then at the end I was just sort of slapping on paint to add a little color. And it ended up working all right. I'm not saying I like won it or anything, but I did not embarrass myself. I think I got third. But when I do speed paint, I'm pretty much just looking to not embarrass myself, since it's not my best area. And I will just do the lips at the same time and shift color later if it comes up. With the original one, I didn't want to give her like a heavily made up look because, you know, she's clearly a practical person doing a practical job. I wanted to try to convey that. Sorry, it is hard for me to talk and paint detail at the same time. I mean, it's hard for me to talk and paint anything at the same time, really. Multitasking is not my big area. Hello, camera. Are you doing that thing with the focus again? All right, her face is looking pretty disastrous at the moment, I realize. I will attempt to fix it. But I don't want to stop concentrating on the value just because it's a little hack at the moment. Like, I think that's what happens. One of the reasons that we don't push contrast is you have something like that happen. You're like, oh, well, clearly that's because contrast bad and contrast not bad. Just, you know, it's tough to have enough contrast and keep everything nice looking in small areas. So I work on the contrast now. Then I will work on the nice a little. It would also help if I could see better, but the reality is I cannot see that well. I have my less close-up glasses on for the, well, not glasses, you know, the visor thing. But that is what I prefer to wear for the show. And also, it kind of makes sense for trying to speed paint or do tabletop miniatures, because you don't want to see everything you're screwing up, or you will take forever. I mean, okay, if you're a seasoned tabletop painting pro, you will not get distracted. But if you're someone like me, who very easily gets caught up in trying to make everything look super nice, you will lose the big picture idea that you're trying to get this done fairly quickly and get distracted by trying to fix everything. I mean, as I said, I think it's worth taking a little time on the face because of the importance of a face. But that still should be a little time in the context of the overall task, not going too crazy. So I find lips very challenging to paint, because it's like you have to kind of do it at the end, and there's no more being allowed to mess up. Because my painting approach is often like, do I care that I got paint under there? No, I do not, because I haven't painted that yet. I'm probably just going to have to accept that they won't look awesome unless I go get a tiny brush. And I didn't even pull out a tiny brush for today. Alright, make sure that there's nothing under her neck. And I'm gonna do, since I have all these on my palette, I can at least do the hands after I do the blue and the pink parts, because I'm almost certainly gonna get blue and pink paint elsewhere. And now I'm just gonna try to add a little more, you know, bring out some of the shapes a little more, fix it up if my initial pass of where I was putting the values was not quite correct. Look for parts that maybe are still patchy. And then work on a few like wrinkles and whatnot. And this color is not going to quite match unless I spend a lot more time painting over it, but I like the color better than I did before. And there's no reason that piece of material would have to be exactly the same as the outer coat area. So I'm just going to be okay with that. I'm also going to be okay if the camera decides to focus. Is closer going to make you happier? Yes. Okay. possibly I should have done the blue leggings first. That now seems like it would have been a sensible thing to do, but oh well. And I like to talk about the order that I decide to paint things in, because it really is one of the most common questions I get asked, like paint and takes or kind of more open painting events than classes, since in classes I'm usually already going to be saying that, so nobody has to ask what order to do stuff in. Speaking of classes, I don't know when Reaper has everything planned to go live, but we are at least testing entering classes in the new system. I mean, in theory, I haven't, like, they sent me an email about testing. I'm like, well, this implies that I have to decide what I want to teach at ReaperCon. And then my brain got stuck there, and I haven't quite gotten past that part yet. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to be crazy and do something new, or do something I haven't done in a while, which I guess for people who've only attended a few ReaperCons will be much the same as doing something new. Now there's a little thing here, and I don't think it is part of the 3D sculpt or anything like that. I think it's like a chip of when I was prepping or a primer or something. Yeah, so that came right off. If you missed the episode where I was like stress testing and taking a closer look at the surface of the 3D materials, that was last week. Or if you go on my YouTube channel, I posted a video on there as well, where I went through, I dropped them on my desk some and showed what the surfaces look like. I compared the two that I had not painted as yet, because I was sent 3. And then I did a little prep. And then really the only thing that was different that I put on my stream last week is that then I primed this week to prepare it for today. And I did not prime anything on the video that I made to look at the 3D prints. But that video also includes high-res pictures, because as you can see that this camera is not always super cooperative. Maybe we might even say it's not ever super cooperative. I don't know. Come on, what's your problem now? There we go. So she's not like super muscular, but she is a hauler of things, so it doesn't hurt to give a little effort on emphasizing the muscles on the arms. Pick up the edges a little. That looks nice on the tabletop usually. So part of the reason I went with a slightly more saturated color scheme is I think it is very helpful on tabletop painting. I know everybody wants everything to be dark and grim and whatever, but the reality is that more vivid colors attract our eye better, and using them in at least some places on a figure is a way to create contrast and make it easier for people looking at the figure to parse what is going on, which is a lot of what we're doing. Like, the sculptors put a ton of stuff there, but it's so small that nobody can really see it unless we accentuate it with paint, get them closer up, or, and I guess add light. More in-scale lighting. So I noticed I'm trying to write a blog about painting this figure, blog post, I should say. And I was looking back at some past figures and doing the, arm's length kind of thing, and noticing just how much more I could see some of the ones that had a little more color. Like, not necessarily everything had to be super colorful, just that there was, more color in some places. It also helps if you're not painting in a way that's super clean, like if you're doing a lot of dry brushing and washing and stuff. It helps keep things from looking too murky from any distance away, which is how we use tabletop miniatures, is from a distance away. But honestly, it even, and it took me a while to learn this, it's important for contest miniatures to look good at arm's length as well, because arm's length is, people are walking down the tables at ReaperCon deciding what they want to take a closer look at, or you're looking through the web store at thumbnails deciding which ones you want to take a closer look at. That is the equivalent of the arm's length thing for tabletop miniatures. So a really good display miniature does both. It looks good at arm's length, so you want to pick it up and look closer, and then when you do look closer, you're rewarded with the, fancy brushwork and things like that don't really, people can't see them at a distance. So that isn't enough to make a miniature look great. You can be a fantastic technical painter and paint a miniature that people don't want to stop and look at, because it doesn't, you can't appreciate anything until you get close up. And I would say, ask me how I know this, it's because that is what I do a lot. I mean, I don't know that it's reasonable to say I'm a fantastical technical painter. I'm a good technical painter. But it's all this other stuff, the color use and all that kind of thing, that I have laboriously been trying to figure out for these many years. And so I said, don't cheat on the face. The legs of this figure are an excellent place to cheat on a tabletop miniature, because, this one's under the body. We can't really see it anyway. That one, there's just a little bit that would be getting light. It's not part of the story. They're heavily covered over by gear. I can call the legs good. Now I'm going to go to the hands. See, now this is where my life gets difficult if I do the hands now. And this is why I did not. Because there are all these belts and things down there. So I think perhaps that I will not go to the hands, but I will add a little more of the deep recess shadow thing. And I guess I need a hook brush. And I don't know if this one has turned into a nice hook. It's a little more than what I had. So if you get one of these synthetic brushes that has a little hook on the end, you can kind of get it around. If you've got a ledge and you're trying to get some dark color under the ledge kind of thing. But speaking of dark color, what I will do is some dark lining. Because that's definitely going to be helpful to add definition for a tabletop miniature. And I've got this blue liner already sitting here. So why not? Hello, would you like to focus? Okay, that face does look kind of awful, but I'm trying not to think about it. I want to get her ready for the game, not get her perfect, right? Right. Wow, you guys are quiet today. Or am I just this intensely boring? I saw the chat from earlier with Anne. You were much livelier then, but it's that afternoon slump thing, probably. I know how that goes. Maybe it would help if I zoomed out just a little for this part, since I'm moving her around a lot. I don't have adorable puppies to talk about, though. That's probably where I've gone wrong. So I don't know if anyone's seen the. I'm going to guess that some of you have seen the trailers for the D&D movie, but that big fat red dragon at the end. That I just think of Corbin every time. It's like he's successful at his job of eating people and fierce, and this is, well, Corbin is either that or, the big-eyed cat thing from Puss in Boots. Like, those are his two modes. I am a fierce predator, fear me, or I am a sad baby that needs taken care of, do what I want. But I love that Chomp Dragon so much, I can't even tell you. Even if the rest of the movie is as terrible as the first one was, which does not really seem possible, I will love this movie for having giant Chomp Dragon in it. Hands up if you saw the first one with Jeremy Irons way back in the day. I went to the show with my friend. I think we were like the only people in that theater too. And I just about fell out of my chair laughing at the complete like Jeremy Irons just like chews up the scenery, then nails it back together so we can chew it up again. Like, it's just, wow. And he'd won his Academy Award before that. It was like, well, clearly I'm beginning to understand what the function of a director is. Like, I didn't quite get it before I saw this movie, but now I get it. The director stops people like Jeremy Irons from just going whichever way they want, if that is not appropriate. So I guess I can't say that movie didn't give me anything, because it gave me an understanding of the role of the director. This is going to be a tricky one, is why I keep moving around. I enjoy the quippiness too. I know it's not for everyone. I've seen some people kind of being like unhappy with the quippiness, but I enjoy quippiness in general, and I would certainly say that it is characteristic of D&D games that I've played, especially if I've been there. Even if no one else is going to quip, I will. That is like half the fun in my mind. And now I'm discovering a part that doesn't have any pink on it, that should. You can see at the top of right here. I don't think you can see, but I found it in time to slap a little paint on there. It occurs to me I probably should have made my metallic water. Typically I like to have a different water jar for metallics to prevent little shiny flakes from getting in things that I don't want to look shiny. And it's like it's not going to bite you every time. But it does create problems now and then, so. Like forgetting that this part is pink, that also creates problems. This part is just going to be shadowy though. I feel like I'm missing some spots, but hopefully that's my imagination. Nobody's confirming or denying having seen the trailer. I'm not sure how you're supposed to, it's Ember showed, which if he's really French, it would be show, not showed, but the red dragon, who was previously established to be, you know, quite the chonk boy, apparently. This was not made up for the movie. It was in some pre-existing thing that I guess I did not play. I'm gonna just go ahead and make these belts darker in case I don't get in there with some paint later, which is, you know, like entirely possible. Although now I see that I want to wear something that's not a belt. I'm gonna do the erase move. And return to the belt momentarily. Is there anything that I can do for the face while I'm here? That's funny. Why is chat not scrolling right? Yeah. Oh, we can put a little bit of pink on her lip so that she looks a smidge more lively. And I could put a little bit on her cheek also, which I did do on the web store one. And if I don't want it to be super pink, I can just mix a little bit of my red color with skin color and kind of tone it down, so it's a little more natural. That is the extreme sadness of my cat again. Hello, do you need snuggles? Come say hi to everybody. So to do the cheek thing, I'm going to heavily thin down that succubus kiss. Heavily. I would rather do it again, because I didn't do anything the first time, than cover everything over because I made it too thick. And even though the succubus kiss is very dark, it is a little more transparent and a little more saturated, so it makes more sense to use than the pale violet red that has a lot of water. I mean, a lot of white, not a lot of water. It doesn't have a lot of water in it. And I see that I got a little bit of that where I didn't want it. But mostly I'm just going to not worry about it, I think. All right. I think I will switch over to metallics. But let me actually first show my palette, because I ended up doing a little bit differently than what I expected. So here's the figure. The pink did not go up here, and there's barely any of this, and the blue did not use any of these. There's like maybe a little bit of that mixed with this one. And even the skin, I ended up stopping like around here. Normally, I would take skin at least up to there. And I kind of feel like I should. but I would need to successfully find a tiny brush. Let's see. Let's see if what I can do here. Have any of you received this figure for the monthly promotion and taken a look at the 3D print surface? I'm sure people will be interested in hearing from additional viewpoints in addition to mine. I think I've seen people on the Facebook group talk about having received it and it being sturdier than they expected. Yes, I am now covering up some of the red that I just put on. And I will have to decide if I want to put it back or not. It's hard for me to be rough and ready with faces, I will admit. Babadook 4. Hello. I'm trying to do kind of a tabletop version of the figure that I painted for the Reaper web store, which is a red, yellow, blue color scheme. Pink is red in color scheme terms. But I wanted to make it a little more saturated than what I'd done here. And the skin has a yellowish undertone, is the yellow so far. But eventually there will be loads of equipment that will be either reddish brown or yellowy brown. But now we do some metallic. And I will probably have to use the shaker, because metallics definitely need to be shaken well. Let's see, I got my blade steel. These are colors that I just keep here for when I do the show that are from the Learn to Paint kits or the expansion sets for the Learn to Paint kits, which I don't think there are any metallics in the expansion sets, since there are plenty of metallics in the two Learn to Paint sets. Well, I mean, sure, there are more metallics available than that, but those weren't colors that I felt were missing from if you were legitimately just starting out with these. What colors did you need? Because I don't think there was an orange in either of the sets. There was certainly not a purple, and I definitely live in a world where I believe you need purple to paint. So I'm checking this. Oh, okay. I'm pleasantly surprised because I was using some of this paint set that I keep kind of beside my desk for the show the other day when I was testing an idea for a class I could do at ReaperCon. And a lot of them were gunked up. I'm going to turn the sound off very briefly to shake everything. Let's see. If I put her there, she's round, she'll roll away. We'll put this one here for now. So you know something's going on. So I'm going to use this as my darkest metallic color and then add shadows with matte paints because that will also make them less shiny. And I can bring in some of that blue through these shadows. Kind of Michael Proctor style. But you know what? I am actually going to paint more of the surfaces with the blue liner. Metallic often looks good, or takes less effort to paint a good base coat on a darker color. Which it doesn't have to be this dark. I guess I could use my in-between blue. Although it is getting a little chunky. How zoomed out am I? I think that might be where I want to be for a minute while I'm moving around more. So I will be missing one little buckle that is on her belt that I can return to later. Because we'll really just need a few little dots of metallic. Then I have to think about if there are any other places. I will also probably skip those areas of the bow. And I'm going to need to add blue liner to this part of the belt as well. On the one I painted for the store, I ended up painting just like super dark leather for these bits, and I think that is going to be what happens here as well for at least some of these straps. Just because I knew a bunch of them were going to have to be pretty shadowed. And then a dark dull color also made a pretty reasonable contrast with the other things I got going on there. We'll just go ahead and put blue liner underneath. And I won't be painting the back. So, oh, the spear, of course. Now, in miniature, I'm handling a lot. This is something that I would prefer not to paint until the end because I'm bound to be touching it. But for practicality's sake, in this scenario, I would paint it now so that I only have to, I'll also have to come back to that little ring on the pouch. Or decide that it is made out of a different material. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure one of my crevices is crevassy enough. Oh, and that helm is also metal. I actually even checked with Bobby Jackson because I was like, could you fit that over your head if it was, you know, a non-yielding surface? I was pretty sure it was meant to be metal, but I just wanted to see what Bobby had envisioned when he was sculpting her. Well, and first he said who. I'm like, how many figures are you? Because I said the girl that with all the stuff, or I think I called her Oswaldiel, the overlaying. And he's like, which one is that? And I'm like, well, how many are you sculpting that just have an insane amount of stuff on them that you don't remember? But I'm sure he sculpted this like some time ago because the the way the timeline works, that is often the case. That something the sculptors are done and moved on to something well before we ever see it. All right. So I have only put out my starting color for the metallics at this point. I find that metallics gunk up pretty fast, even on a wet palette. I don't know if that's just me, but that has been my experience. So I like to just put out a little bit and then add to it if I need to, dispense some more and continue working rather than put out a bunch and try to make it survive through a session. Sorry, I keep finding places that need more under paint or more crevice hiding paint. I like this blade steel. I think it covers pretty well. It's a neat steel type color. The Bones metallics were developed later. See, I'm making the classic mistake of going over it, and I've actually taken some paint away doing that. So we're just going to dot that on and then stop touching that part. And I believe that Anne has said that she had different kinds of flake available at this point. So they are a little shinier, I think, than the ones in the main line. All right, am I gunked up already? Don't think so. Possibly I need to add a little water. And I will enjoy doing this in metallics instead, because the non-metallics were not my favorite part of painting the store copy. I don't know why it was a little extra annoying, but it just felt like I ended up having to go back and fiddle on parts that I felt like I should have been able to get right the first time. Wasn't quite able to keep the rim of blue on that one because I had to work around the spear haft. And I see another place where I got a chunk of something stuck somewhere. But given where it is, which is, facing down on our thing, other than I will go ahead and fix it just to show you again how I do that. You can do this with the blade of a hobby knife as well. Just scratch out little things like this that come in. And depending on where it happened, it may not even add a little bit of texture to your surface or anything. By where, I mean, if it's under the primer, then that's something where I may need to smooth the surface out. But usually it's something a little further up in the layers. gonna have to watch I don't accidentally paint her pants metallic, because it's like, well, everything that this blue should be metallic, but that includes her pants, and that would be weird. That should be metallic though, and it's not blue. So I shall return to that momentarily. Let's get some on this helm. And I don't feel like I have to go nuts going under that little section. That is a shadow area. It would not be getting a lot of light and being reflective. So it doesn't need to have actual metallic in it. As long as I get the edge a little bit, it should be fine. I'm going to say that my metallic is a little chunky and does need to have some water added. Like to the bottle, for now I will just add it on the palette, but I would add this to the bottle. And I guess we'll see if I can make it look like a ding or something, if it shows up in the end. Because that's what weathering is for. To disguise other issues. Yes, that is much better. I should not have been stubborn. I should have added water in the first place. But I guess it'll just be an excuse to do some weathering. Try to be a little bit careful and not get a bunch of metallic on things I don't want to be metallic. Because I'm sure we've all experienced the pain of glitteriness on stuff you don't want to be glittery. I think the knee pads are good. She's got a couple of nice pieces of equipment, which I guess suggests that the adventurers found even better things. Because I'm imagining that she has like the old cast hobs, or just things that, you know, you can carry this by wearing it. I think I saw a video of something like that recently. Someone was overweight at the airport, so they just took a bunch of clothes out of their suitcase and put them on in layers. It's like, well, that doesn't seem like a comfortable way to travel, but it is a potential way to solve that problem, I guess. That's another place where the little hooky comes in handy. Feel like I'm missing something. Let's just put another coat on this thing that I definitely do not know the word for. Right, now some shading on the metallics, which I don't think I've actually done a lot on here with you. Hello. I do not want to focus. Hey, Chaos 0507. I'm doing all right. How are you? I'm working on the mini of the month, which is a 3D print. So last week I talked about how I prepped it, and this week I thought I would try to paint a tabletop version of what I painted for the Reaper web store. Well, I guess it's the Reaper gallery too. It's not like they're not going to get the figure in the end. They get the figure in the end. I am actually going to use brush on sealer to mix my shadows. No, I'm not. That's for mixing the highlights. Never mind. I'm just going to use water. I won't be fancy. And my old friend blue liner. Do I want to mix something else in? Is it too dark for a first go? Yeah, I'll mix a slightly lighter version with this Hobgoblin Blue. Well, Hobgoblin Blue the second. We're painting with two Hobgoblin Blues today. Amusingly enough, but that's because this one is from Pathfinder, which is like a licensed thing, and Pathfinder picked their colors and the names for their colors, so they named that Hobgoblin Blue. And then this other color is probably Ron's personal vision of what a Hobgoblin would look like. Which again, I can't really confirm or deny because I apparently have never looked into what Hobgoblins look like. For whatever reason. I'm trying to dull down the blue a little because I want the shadows in the metal to be like blue, but not like crazy blue. So I just mixed other colors that were already on my palette into, so this is the mix that I made. Get a little more out. Actually, where's the paper? That's the easier way to see it. This is the mix I made. And this is Hobgoblin Blue as it comes out of the bottle. So it's a very saturated paint. Even though it's super dark, it's very saturated. Ooh, Chaos is getting some Reaper paints on Thursday. Hopefully you gonna have some fun with some new colors. I always like new colors. There's no such thing as enough color in my book. Sorry, I put that the wrong way around. So I want somewhat duller colors for the shadows on the metallics. And I will pick a direction for the light, in theory. Yeah, I'll say that would probably be most effective. This might need more water. I will be trying to do the quick version. And now that it's thinned down, even though I like dulled it out with these other things, the blue within the Hobgoblin is showing up. So I like to pull towards the shadow color if I can. Trying to remember, but I think the only metallics that I've painted on here with you all on that elf where I stole the color scheme from a pillow advertisement. I'm trying to remember his name. It was something kind of snotty. You know, because elf. Aerovore? Chaos is excited to see what clear magenta looks like. That is a very potent color. That is clear magenta. Excellent for mixing your own colors, and if you want to, like if I wanted to make this pink even brighter, I could do a glaze with this and it would pump up the pink, which maybe I'll do that after I finish with the metallics if there's still some time, just for fun. Oh, I forgot about these little fleur-de-lis armor thingies. Which honestly, based on their location, are going to be heavily shadowed. Now that this is dry, I will return to attempting to add a little shadow here. Then I have a slightly darker one that probably needs more water. I got some of that intense blue in my blue liner, and I don't think that I want it there. So that was, this was the first shadow color that I was using, and we'll see if I put enough water in here. There's the second one. So it's darker and duller, which is often how it works for shadows. Now the plane of this axe is actually tilted down towards the ground, so it would not really be super bright. So I feel okay going a little darker in the shadows than I might if she was like holding it straight up. And I'm trying to decide if I actually thin down the blue liner a little too much. I think I did. I think I'll grab just a little more paint and mix that in. But as I've said many times, I would rather go too thin and do this than not transparent enough and cover up stuff that I care about. Because that takes longer to fix. totally see now that I forgot to paint the chainmail, and I probably would have gone on forgetting to paint that. So I'll finish this and then get back to that metallic, which will have been out long enough that I will feel like I need fresh paint. I don't know if you all have that experience. I don't hear people complain about this very much, but I feel like my metallics get goopy and unworkable pretty quickly out on the palette. In some ways, it's almost worse on a wet palette than dry. I mean, dry, it's drying out, but it doesn't get the kind of goopy aspect. Want to make sure I accentuate that cool helmet shape where it's, you know, curving down. It's curving towards your face a little too, but I think actually I want a nice reflection on that side. So I won't do anything bigger. And I feel like the blue is a lot. I wish I had walnut brown or brown liner, but I do not. Let's see. I'll go with my mwangi brown, and I'm going to mix a little black in. Because I think the blue is almost like, if this were a paladin or something, the level of blue in the shadows might be kind of interesting. But I think that it would make more sense for not to be quite as blue. And then if I add some brown, it kind of, and I did this actually on the non-metallic metal too. Added some glazes of blue and added some glazes of a dark brown that looks like, I don't want it to look like rust. This is, you know, someone who takes care of their stuff, but just like dirt and the stuff that's hard to get out of the crevices kind of thing. I could also probably do this with weathering powders, but then I would have to go get weathering powders. So I'm going to do it this way instead. It just adds a little more visual information, keeps things interesting as well. But I feel like the blue, it just isn't looking completely realistic. Now, if you're going to town on this instead of trying to get a figure painted quickly, you can do stuff like figure out, okay, is this surface facing towards the sky or towards the ground? Like this axe is facing towards the ground. And then it would get a lot more, you know, we'd be reflecting brown or green or something like that because of what's around it. And then surfaces that are facing up would be reflecting more blue. But I am not painting this in that way. I'm just trying to make it look cool, and having additional colors in the reflections is realistic. So even if you don't do it exactingly correct, doing it at all makes something look better. And I am liking this much more. I don't know if you all can even see it because the camera was doing its camera thing. But I'm much happier with that. And I could have waited until I was working on leather and had these colors out, and that would have been probably a sensible, efficient thing to do. But sometimes I feel better if I can resolve problems more immediately instead of more efficiently. And then from the point of view of doing this as a show, we will not be looking at leather colors until next week. So that would not work. All right, now I go back to metallics. Hey, David Weir. Carrie Michael Cosby. I use well for metallics. They do still get a little goopy, but I just thin them back down and keep going. Yeah, I prefer to just dispense frequently, as a rule. So I'm not even going to try to use the ones that I was using 15 minutes ago when I painted the base coats. I'm just going to get fresh. And add a little water because I earlier discovered that I had some goopy going on in my bottle. Never mind, on the palette. And actually, now we thin. Now we thin with the brush on sealer. I'll use gloss actually. Because this is medium and it's going to keep those little metallic flakes in suspension better. But I am going to shake this on the machine, so I'll briefly mute. So if you thin metallics down with water, like more than I just added a little water so that they're the correct consistency, but you're like trying to make them somewhat transparent, you will probably find that the little metal flakes and the colors and the kind of goo part of the paint start separating on your palette. And using gloss sealer or brush on sealer helps prevent that, because this is essentially the clear part of paint. Like this is the paint part of paint, the non-pigment thing, the stuff that makes it acrylic paint, makes it stick, makes it form a nice paint film. So it will keep the metallic flakes in suspension better than straight water. And I want them thinned down a little because I'm coming back over, and just if I got some shadow where I didn't mean to, this is going to brighten up the shine. And then I can do this again, but with a lighter color and make highlights just like you would with matte paints. So I kind of just covered over all the detail on some of these smaller areas with the shadow, and now I have to get a little bit back. But also these edges I want to make sure are nice and bright, because we want edges to look like sharp and lethal and whatnot. Hello camera, there we go. No? No, I thought you wanted it closer. You want it further? All right, camera, make up your mind. How about here? No, you're still being a booger about it. All right, let's start here. And lose your tiny mind. So this stage isn't, like an extensive thing. It's just making sure that shiny parts are shiny before I add even shinier. Get the edge of this back a little. Get this edge as well. And I tried as much as I could to put like if there was a face, especially like a plane that met, I'm putting shadow on one side and light on the other. Areas where there's like very light and very dark near in proximity, we tend to read as shiny. So that's like the whole way that non-metallic metal works at all. But you can apply the same principle to metallics if you're shading them with matte paints. You can, add that little element and accent it with both the actual texture of the paint and then the location of where you're putting the two kinds of paint. I should tell Michael he better do his shaded metallic class at ReaperCon because I do not explain this very well. But I suspect that he will not. He's been super into practicing non-metallic metals for the past year or two. So I suspect that he will not do his shaded metallics class this year, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out when the class schedule gets released. Yeah, I'm definitely going to add some wear and tear there where I made gunkiness from not having added water to my paint. All right, I think that's good. And now I will, so I started with blade steel. I've got polished silver and filigree silver. And I feel like, I don't know if she's going to be like super, super shiny, so I'll do the filigree. But I'll put out some of the polished silver as well, just if I want to hit like the tips and edges and stuff. But I need to shake, so I'm muting again for just a second. All right, and actually, I should check these as well. I think because I have the Learn to Paint set of paints that I have set aside for the show, I have them in, I think it's an aromatherapy bottle holder thing. It's like a little briefcase, but with slots. But I keep it on its side, and I think that is why some of the caps are gooping up. And this is hilarious to me that it's not the metallics that are doing this, it's the matte paints. That is weird, but okay. And I'm again going to use the gloss sealer to make those a little more transparent. Although maybe I don't want to make this one more transparent. We'll have two clumps out. Because kind of for top highlights from metallics, sometimes it's good to not thin it down, just like for regular, actually. I believe these are going to need water added to them as well. I have found that, just as I was saying, metallics act a little differently on the palette. When I do my paint maintenance thing, or if I start seeing issues with paint, it will start happening with metallics way before the regular paints as a rule. And if I've had paints, on occasion I've had paints that I've left like a very long time and neglected, and the bulk of them will be fine, but if I experience losses, it is most likely to be in the metallics. Like it's a different formula, and it just, it doesn't want to be paint as much, I guess. So they take a little more tender loving care if we want them to work at their best. And actually, I want a little more shine right here, because that will help draw attention to her face. And it seems crazy that I did the highlighting, but you see, it took as long to get the paint ready as, like, I'm done with the filigree silver. Now I'm doing some of the polished silver. Because highlights can be in pretty small areas. It doesn't necessarily take forever to do. But I did once again forget the chainmail. I see that now. We need a little more paint. Because I thinned down my hone steel. So there's my boo-boo. How would I? So what I need is a dark line to be the scratch, and then the light color to be hello. On the other side of it. So, and this again is the same way that I would do this on non-metallic metal. And I did for her. I didn't want her stuff to look like super clean and perfect. So I gave her a lot of dings and scratches and stuff. And yeah, actually, let's go all the way up to the brightest highlight color. So that was, I had added a line inadvertently on the helmet. That wasn't actually texture from the 3D print or anything. That was texture that I had added by being stubborn and not thinning my metallics down initially. And so I just decided to treat it as battle damage. And turn it into something intentional. Okay, that lighter color. Super smooth, but we're going to live with it. I'm going to put some of that lighter color on that space I want to be super reflective. I also want this to look super reflective, so it looks nice and pointy. All right, I think that is like the basics of metallics, other than, of course, the chainmail that I keep forgetting. So let me check my palette mixes. Yeah, that is goopy. Ugh. All right, this is what I say about metallics, and I think Carrie's saying it. This isn't going to happen as much on a welt palette, but this was actually this first. No, that was the second. So you can see that it's not even stirring anymore. It's just making gross clumps. So this is why I just put out a little and then put out some more later. Or you get a side palette like Carrie does, and that helps too. But I have limited space here. So this is what it looks like straight out of the bottle. I just added a smidge of water because I've noticed that my in the bottle stuff is getting thick. But that's what it's supposed to stir like. Not this grossness. And I just accept this as the nature of metallics. When I did my paint maintenance last year, most of my losses were metallics, and that was across brands. That wasn't like it was only Reaper or anything. I lost almost all my Viejo Air metallics, which are a kind that I like a lot. So here I want to use the side of my brush and try not to get into those crevices very much. Also, I don't know if you can hear the super sad cat behind me. Hi, super sad cat. Can you give me a minute? I do not know why she's so tragic today. We're trying to make her happy, but she just doesn't seem to want to go for it. And now, if you're looking at the knee pads and they look weird, well, it's upside down. So that's how shading and highlighting works. It should look weird when you turn the figure over, because you painted the light as if it's coming from a specific direction. And if you start looking at it in a different direction, it should look weird. So don't take stuff back, because I think that's what happens sometimes when you're trying to push your contrast. You flip something around and you're like, look at all this, it's so stark and horrible, and surely I have to fix that. You know, put it down, come back and look at it later. Make sure you're looking at it from the correct orientation before you... I'm going to need to have a slightly thicker version of that filigree silver before you undo what you just spent a bunch of time doing. So I'm just trying to add a few places where the chainmail is receiving more light. And this again is what I did with the non-metallic metal. I will show you in just a sec. I don't want to gunk up that detail too much, so I think I'm just going to leave that there. It does seem like there's not quite enough shine. Like the shine seems to stop abruptly on the camera. Interestingly, I can't see it in person as much. But it is a material that, you know, it's kind of like cloth. It's going to have more folds and shape. Like, it's not going to wrinkle with the same kind of detail as cloth, but it's going to display a little more flexibility than, you know, the steel helmet or spearhead are fixed. They're solid. They're not going to conform to any other shapes. They're their own shape. But something like chainmail will. So that's the metallic. And I do feel like her outfit is pretty pink, but it might be fun just to see what would happen if I went ahead and used that clear magenta on it. So here I will get a weld palette, because I'm going to thin it down a bunch. And then I'm really going to hope that I don't have too many flakes in my water. Definitely are some flakes in my water. I know what I'll do. I will use a blister pack as a little temporary water cup with fresh water. So I keep a little bottle of water by my desk, usually to top up my wet palette. Like, I noticed that it was getting a bit dry in there, but since I was working on metallics, that didn't really seem like something I should fix. But it will come in handy for this as well. And I've thinned this heavily down. So let's look at the magenta that I've lost. There it is. Let's look at it straight out of the bottle and thin down. So it's called clear because a lot of pure pigments are semi or fully transparent. So Anne decided that was a good thing to call it so that you know going in. I kind of think of them as matte inks. So you add it to things as a color intensifier or glaze over. Like if I go over an existing thing, you can see that it is indeed clear. So it's a very intense color, but it's not a very opaque color. So this is it straight out of the bottle. But it is intense enough that it would cover over some of what I've done. So I've heavily thinned it down to do this glaze, just as I would if it were an ink. If it were a traditional shiny ink, I would thin it down. for this kind of purpose. But you could also take it and mix a version of like this color by adding a little white. So it is possible that I thin this so much it won't make much difference, but we will do one section, and since it's broken up into parts, we can test this pretty easily. And glazes are often like this. It won't seem like they're doing anything, but if you are able to directly compare, I should say, it will. So the pink has been somewhat intensified, and I could go back and, add a little more pink, do another coat. There's lots of ways to get it pinker, but since there aren't a lot of ways to take it back, if I went in there with it closer to straight out of the bottle, that's why I like to start thinner. So yeah, I think that's my new way of trying to explain what the clears are in the quickest way possible is matte ink. I don't know if that means that now I need to make her neck cloth a little more intense too. Let's do that. Yeah, we got like 2 minutes left. I will grab clear blue and do the same thing on her. But just the part that's near her face. I'm just going to do it on the part that's near her face, not the blue that's lower down, because the blue that is lower down is in an unimportant to look at location. So I don't want to bump up the saturation. And this is, phthalo is intense. Phthalo blue is just super intense. But I will do that same straight out of the bottle comparison, because it's also like, it seems like it's really dark, but then once you start thinning it down, you start seeing all the intense. So here is phthalo straight out of the bottle. I'm also testing whether I've thinned enough by doing this, which I genuinely do test. And that's what it looks like, thinned down to be used as a color intensifier. Orchid Twilight. This is a standard gaming scale miniature. So 32, 35 millimeter. I don't know what they are these days. I just zoom in a lot so that people can see what I'm doing. If you're familiar with Sir 4 scale, the Weeper size guide, there he is next to this figure, at which if we put them base to base. And he's a little, that's funny, they're kind of in similar positions. He's more bent over than she is though. So now I will apply that brighter blue to this area. And it's still drying, but if you compare it, I know that these are just little small pieces now, but it really kind of bumped up the saturation on that blue. So if you're in that position where you're like, well, I wanted this to be like red and it's not as red as I wanted, clear red is a great color to use, clear blue for the blues, and then there are also nice colors to kind of mix your own. I realize now I didn't really do the rivets, but I also didn't do her buckle, so we shall circle back to that when we finish with all of the very many accessories next week, which I have a cheat code for, so hopefully I will still get through them in the session. We'll see. I'll show you how I sped it up a little on the, let me just make sure I'm dry before I touch Ron's miniature. Sped it up a little on the store version. So that's kind of similar color schemes, but with a few twists where the one on the left is non-metallic metal and this one is true metallics, and I also wanted to have the more saturated color, which I'm liking, and I kind of think I went a little too dark and dim on her clothing. But I will show you nice pictures of that because of how the camera is. And then sign off. I'm sure that Quindy will be looking for someone to raid for us. So this is like the official Reaper Store paint job for this figure, and I'm kind of doing the tabletop version. And so I did the skin, the metallics, and the cloth, and next week I will do all of this wood and leather and rope and whatnots. At least we hope. We hope that I will do all of the whatnots. And then if you're interested in seeing the prep and getting a closer look at the 3D printed surface, watch the stream from last week. Yes. Why do I have a picture of a letter? I got a new computer and we were signing it up for like auto pay stuff. And my bank sent a snail mail to tell me that this had happened, that someone had signed my bank card up for auto pay services on this computer. So if I had not done that, please let them know. And I'm like, snail mail? That's like 5 days after I did this. Is that really hopeful? It just seemed very hilarious to me. So I took a picture so I could laugh at that in the future. But all right, Quindy is gonna, snail mail. Well, it absolutely positively has to get to you eventually. Yeah, it's like, really? Like, really? It's like, what? I think I had 2 bank cards. I think the other bank either sent it in email or just didn't even say anything. But I was like, I guess I appreciate your concept of security, maybe, but no. All right, so Quindy's going to find us a raid, and she just shared links to my blog and YouTube channel. So if you want to see more about the 3D prints, go to that YouTube channel. It's the most recent video. And then say hi to Art of Mike Disney for me. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Quindy. Bye.